Another X-class solar flare left the sun. Big, potentially record-breaking heat is in store for portions of the United States, and today marks a sea change in the weather, and the countdown is on. And folks, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about your weekend forecast, your beach weather outlook, the long-range outlook, and yeah, we'll get into the solar and geological update too. But we are going to start the show today with yet again another threat of significant severe weather with our severe weather update. Hi folks, and welcome into Cold Rain's Weather World. Jason Pritchard here with you. We've got all the weather, and unfortunately the northern tier into the Midwest, the upper Midwest, has all the severe weather today with an enhanced level 3 risk from essentially Minot, North Dakota, Bismarck, over to Fargo, Grand Forks, into Duluth, and the northwestern tip of Wisconsin here, folks, for potentially damaging winds, strong tornadoes, and very large hail. In fact, 10% tornado risk here for Bismarck, Fargo, into Grand Forks, places like that, 5% around that. So we could see some strong tornadoes this afternoon. Wind is going to be a big threat. A complex is going to form, a thunderstorm complex, move through the area with a bow echo and potentially produce winds in excess of 70 miles per hour all along this corridor here. 30% hatched wind area is out here, so you know that means business. Hail as well is a threat, 30% chance of hail within 25 miles of a point, and that could be very, very large hail, over 2 inches in diameter. When you see the hatch, that's what that means, folks. So we're looking at a widespread wind event and hail event, potentially strong tornadoes too over the northern tier. So kind of what's driving this, if we take a look here at the instability, look at this instability. This is mixed layer Cape, and as you can see, these big purple colors start to build in later as we go on into the afternoon and early evening hours. We're talking 6, 7 into the 9, 10 o'clock range. Look at this Cape values, 4,800, almost 5,000 joules per kilogram. Along the Cape boundary here is where the storms are going to track and be very, very intense. And along the leading edge of that complex is where you would find the greatest potential for tornadoes. And some of those tornadoes could actually be fairly intense. If you take a look here at the tornado parameter, this is the significant tornado parameter, and this is just sort of a combination of various indexes in the parameter space to give you an idea of where we might find strong tornadoes if possible. And so we're seeing values well over 1, which is what's needed for a significant tornado. So, but really the tornado threat is going to be up here in sort of the central North Dakota into north central Minnesota as that complex tracks to the north. Big values down here are not going to mean anything if we don't get thunderstorms, and most of the thunderstorms should fire up to the north, but still plenty of rotation in the atmosphere and spin to produce tornadoes. So we're going to have to be on the lookout for all hazards across the northern tier today. Look at this as we get on in toward 8 o'clock local time. Little convective, mesoscale convective vortex is going to produce some spin and really spin up this line of thunderstorms that moves through into the early and late evening hours through North Dakota. We get on into around 1, 2 o'clock. We're seeing that move into north Minnesota over toward Grand Forks into the Duluth area by the time we get on into the pre-dawn hours, and that'll scoot on to the east from there and bother folks in Michigan and then downstream into New York later on as we go into Saturday. But that's what we're looking at, folks. As we get into Saturday, there's your severe weather risk from the UP of Michigan all the way through Rochester, Buffalo, Watertown, places like down into Scranton. We could see a few thunderstorms from that complex as it moves through early in the day. Really, there's a marginal risk around that back through the northern tier as well. So isolated severe weather again on Saturday is not out of the question there. Pretty much the rest of the nation, though, looking pretty good. As we get on into Sunday, we've got another severe weather threat with a low pressure dragging a cold front back through those same areas from Minnesota all the way down into, sort of Norfolk area here back into Nebraska. And so we're going to see a cold front sweep through, some instability and shear along that. It's going to spin up some thunderstorms as well. Plenty of instability will be in this area. It's going to be hot and muggy. And so we're going to see another threat of severe weather across through the plains, but centered really from Duluth and Grand Forks again back down through Norfolk and places like that in Nebraska. So that's your severe weather outlook, folks. Next up, today's Weather IQ question. So now it's time to test your weather IQ, and today's weather IQ question comes from an idea that spawned from yesterday's set of answers in the weather IQ question we had. So the question is, which of the following instruments measures the height of an object in relation to a reference level? A barometer, a heliometer, an altimeter, or a geometer? If you know the answer, type it in the comment section. If you don't, just wait until the end of the show and I will tell you the answer. Then you can go and tell all of your friends what you learned at Cold Rain's Weather World and how cool the show is, and send them over here. Sharing is caring, folks, and if you share it, I would be very, very grateful. Got big weekend plans, folks? Well, you need to know what the weather's going to be, and I'm going to tell you how it's going to shake out. We're going to start with the satellite image, and this looks a lot better than it did yesterday. A little cluster of storms moving through Iowa, extending clouds from there up into the Great Lakes, into the northeast, down the western slopes of the Alps, all the way back into South Texas. Other than that, pretty clear for most of the southeast into Florida, Central Plains, all the way out into the Four Corners, Desert Southwest, clear. But we've got another storm system working in to the Pacific Northwest. It's going to keep the weather unsettled up there and cooler as well, folks. So even going to see some snow breaking out in some of the areas of the Rocky Mountains and the Cascades and the higher peaks, and certainly rain across the north possible this afternoon north of this boundary as the ridge establishes itself over the center part of the country, bringing hot, humid conditions south of there. The storm track is going to track along it and bring these impulses through. So severe weather possible, as we talked about this afternoon and really into the evening and overnight hours. Rain possible into the parts of the northeast. Low pressure up here that has been responsible for the severe weather through the mid-Atlantic, and that frontal zone is all pushed off the coast except for the trailing end of it here through the southeast, where we could see a few showers this afternoon in the deep south. Air quality alerts back here in Utah, Nevada, and places like that in the Four Corners region. So if you're sensitive to that, pay particular attention up here in northeastern Nevada toward Salt Lake City. You could see some particulates in the air down here as well in Fresno and approaching Los Angeles. But everywhere else looking pretty good, just very light risk of air quality up there. So if you're sensitive, just kind of stay indoors in those areas. Wind looking pretty strong here in southern Colorado or southern Wyoming, northern Colorado, where we're seeing gusts maybe into the 40s, 50s this afternoon. Very dry out here. Don't burn anything. Plenty of wind across the west as we got a trough working in. That boundary between the ridge and the trough is going to see strong winds in that particular area as the gradient tightens there. Winds through the Central Plains could gust into the 30s, potentially approaching 40, and then gusty winds across the north and into the northeast as well, particularly in the higher elevations. Southeast, man, look at this. Hardly any wind to speak of at all after a few windy days, but temperatures are going to be surging into the 100s in the Central Plains here. So all of Nebraska basically in the hundreds, and over here in West Kansas and southern South Dakota and up near Pierre, you guys are going to be approaching 105. Desert Southwest hot, cool in the Pacific Northwest, cool in the Northeast relatively speaking, and then 80s and 90s for much of the rest of the nation. As we go on out into Saturday, that heat expands toward the east in the Central Plains, hundreds, and from there back into the Desert Southwest. Look at this, blues and purple showing up, snow in the higher elevations, 50s and 60s for a good portion of the northwestern quadrant of the country. A little cooler along the northern tier and in the northeast, but warming up out here. 80s and 90s making it all the way up into the Great Lakes, up to the Canadian border. 90s and muggy everywhere else. And as we get on into Sunday, folks, much the same regime is taking place. It's going to start, temperatures are back off a little bit in the plains, but they are going to warm up in a big way in the south and southeast and up into the mid-Atlantic as we get into next week. And you can already see that starting to take place. Cooler in the Pacific Northwest and, of course, in the Northwest Quadrant. And down here in the Desert Southwest, you guys are getting a little bit of a break. So as we go on through the day to tomorrow, get on into Friday today, we'll start with today. We can see how this precipitation shakes out. Rainy up here in New England today, a couple of spotty showers in the south, rain working into the Pacific Northwest, a couple showers along. There's that big cluster of thunderstorms coming in through the evening hours into the overnight across the northern tier. But look at everywhere else in the country, high and dry as we get on into Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, a couple of pop-up showers not out of the question. Some of this activity, the Euro's not showing it, but some of this activity from that MCS that moved across the northern tier is going to make it into the northeast. Continued showers and snow showers out in the northwest as well. We get on into Sunday, not much going on on except here in the northeast and into the northern plains again, where more systems are going to track around the top of that ridge. But everybody else looking pretty good in terms of precipitation as we get on in toward Sunday afternoon. Another cluster of storms along the border Sunday could bring a severe weather threat up there. We'll look at that more in detail maybe tomorrow. But in terms of precipitation totals as we go through the day on Saturday, you can kind of see where things shake out. So as we get on in through Sunday, this is where we're looking at the main threat of precipitation. Across the northern tier, this is the corridor for precipitation. A couple of light showers from today into Sunday evening along the very southern areas of the country. You know, a couple of showers possible in Alabama and Mississippi, but we're not looking at a big washout there. Florida could see a little bit more in the way of rain as we go on through the weekend. Looking at how everything kind of shakes out from a beach forecast standpoint, if you're going to head on out to the beaches this weekend, find some relief from the heat, well, you're going to look pretty good up here in the northeast. We're not looking at a lot of rain on Saturday at all. You get on down here to the southern coast, really Florida is where you need to pay attention for more in the way of shower and thunderstorm activity. Not much rain at all along the southeast or Gulf Coast. And in terms of temperatures for Saturday, quite nice along the coast itself. 80s, mid 80s, upper 80s as you get on down here into the southeast. But right along the coast, you may find more in the lower to mid 80s in terms of temperature forecast. Sunday, again, looking pretty good except South Florida, and most of the places along the Gulf looking pretty good too. And then up here into the mid-Atlantic, we're looking good from a precipitation standpoint. Heating up a little bit, 70s down to 80s as we get on out here toward the beaches again, 80s all the way into the Gulf as well, looking at mid 80s for the beach. Winds, not too bad. You know, a lot of times it can get really windy on the beach. So if we go on through Saturday, we're looking at winds not all that bad, gusting 16, 17 up to 20 as we get on into the evening. That'll abate overnight and repeat that same process as we get on into Sunday evening. So we could see gusts in the 20s right along the beaches for the most part, but during the daytime it's not going to be all that bad out there. You'll enjoy it. West Coast, pretty much the same. Stay off the coast in the northwest, pretty high up there to jump off the cliffs anyway. Down here in Southern California, not really looking at all that much in the way of rain. Temperatures 50s all the way up and down, maybe 60s in the Southern California area. Same again on Sunday, so nothing to belabor there. Same temperature profile as well. Winds are going to be a problem though in California. We're going to see windy conditions all through the weekend as that trough is pretty strong moving onshore, and we're just going to see those winds kind of pick up through the day on Sunday. Maybe right along the coast it's a little bit less, but still kind of windy out there. As we take a look at the long-range forecast, I've got to start, unfortunately, I hate to do it, folks, with this map with all this red on it, our alerts map today. Red flag warnings for the Four Corners and Intermountain West. You saw the winds earlier. Don't burn anything out here. Very windy and dry and hot. Hot in the desert Southwest. Extreme heat warnings continue. Temperatures 110 to 115. Extreme heat warnings up here in the Midwest, too, where we're going to see temperatures in the upper 90s with high humidity values. Heat index or heat advisories up all the way around that down to the lower Mississippi Valley. Limit your exposure. It's going to feel very, very bad, and you're going to get heat exhaustion quickly. Extreme heat watches are up through the Ohio Valley, and I'm sure we'll see an expansion of all of that as we go through the coming days. Looking at high temperatures next week, this is not just one model run. This is the European ensemble, 51 members coming together to give you this forecast, folks. This is very impressive for an ensemble. I mean, look at this. Monday afternoon highs, hundreds from, say, Atlantic City all the way down to Charlotte, North Carolina, upper 90s and mid 90s everywhere else. It's getting very hot, very humid. Tuesday it gets worse. 104 maybe at Danville. Look at this, hundreds for an ensemble mean all the way up into New Jersey in the mid-Atlantic, upper 90s, mid 90s everywhere from the central U.S. on east. And then as we get into Wednesday afternoon, maybe a little bit of a backing off in northern New England up into the northern Midwest a little bit. That looks pretty good up there. The ridge starts to diminish a bit. We'll see that in a second, but hundreds all the way down into Georgia still, day after day after day of hundreds. Thursday temperatures, highs in the hundreds again, and hundreds again in the southeast on Friday. That continues into Saturday, although backs off a bit, and there are some signs as we get on into early next week, the following week, that we'll start to get more reasonably hot temperatures in the 90s instead of hundreds out here and get into the low 90s. But this is awful, awful hot weather, folks. And the thing that's driving this is the thing that we've been looking at. It's just been this relentless ridge. So you see this ridge, we'll start here at the beginning of the week, but look at that. Here's the storm track around that ridge, folks. You get this big trough coming into the west coast, unsettled out here in the west, and then your storm track's going to look something like that, and that'll shift a little bit south over time as that ridge weakens a bit. But that is just a death ridge, mega torch, heat dome, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be extremely, extremely hot. And as we get way on out in time, you kind of see it backing off here. This is back toward the end of June here, getting in toward June the 30th, July the 1st. We're starting to see some of those colors abate, get a little troughing working in here. This is European ensemble mean, so hopefully it'll back those temperatures down and bring a little bit of a rain chance back into the eastern portion of the country. For July, this climate forecast system has July very, very warm, it looks like, with the ridge centered over the west central portion of the country, which could lead a storm track to be such that little mesoscale convective systems track through the northeast, maybe even into the mid-Atlantic and upper southeast too. But we'll see how that plays out. But folks, today is a sea change in the weather, and I'll tell you what that means. From this day forward, all days start to get shorter. So people like me that like shorter days and cooler weather, we have something to hang our hats on. It's not going to get cool anytime soon, but we will notice the daylight start to get shorter. That will happen in earnest as we get on in toward August. But in the meantime, folks, the countdown is on till Christmas. It is just a bit over 188 days left. We are looking forward to that. I don't know about you. I like Christmas. That's my favorite time of the year. So that is what's going on, folks. I'm really looking forward to getting into fall and a cooler time of the year and get rid of all this heat. But we've got things to talk about in the meantime that aren't related to heat, and that's solar weather. We had an X-class solar flare yesterday, folks. So as we look at our geological and solar update, we'll talk about that. Sun shot out a solar flare, interrupted a little bit of radio activity, but fortunately it was a quick hitter. Look at this. Boom, up to like X 1.9 or something like that, but it came up in here into the X range and went back down, so we didn't see any sort of CME come out of the sun, which is good. And that means KP index is low, solar wind is normal, density is normal, nothing going on with Earth's magnetic field, no auroras. We do have sunspots that we're watching coming in down here, and look at this. We've got some magnetism here, negative, positive, so it's sort of interspersed. Not great. Could be more solar flaring, and if we get one of those that kind of is not such a quick hitter, you know, an impulsive event, it could be something a little bit more long-term or last a little bit of a longer time frame is what I'm trying to say. Could see a CME come away. Nothing in the volcano or earthquake department. And there's your moon, 30% waning crescent going down to June the 25th. We'll have a new moon, folks, and there it is. They need to put the moon over here in the dark, but in any event, sun here, moon there. So that brings us to the end of our show, folks, and that brings us to our WeatherIQ answer. And the question was, which of the following instruments measures the height of an object in relation to the reference level? And the answer is an altimeter. And what object do you think an altimeter would be useful within? An airplane potentially, or a spacecraft or something like that? And that is correct, it would be. So that is the answer to the IQ question. A couple of more things to just no fun fact, talk about it at the water cooler. Today in 1782, Congress formally approved, the Continental Congress that is, approved the Great Seal of the United States, you know, the one with the eagle on it. So that was approved in 1872, and also in 1975, a movie that changed the way many people think about water and the beach premiered. Yes, Jaws, folks. Jaws came out in 1975, one of my very favorite movies. Watch it every year in July. If you haven't seen it, if you're of the younger generation, haven't seen that movie, it's awesome. Take a look at it. And that was it. And that's it for today, folks. Now you know about movies and the Continental Congress and weather, and hopefully any other questions that you have, feel free to type them in the comment section. We're over 800 subscribers, so if you know people that enjoy the weather, please direct them to this show, have them subscribe and make comments. I pray over all of you every day. If there's anything specifically I can pray over for you about, please put it in the comment section. Pray for me as well. Folks, that's it. I hope you have a blessed day. We'll be back soon.